it's important to establish just what we're talking about, and also to empower people to describe their own experiences, which are often so peculiar that unless there is a group such as this, a person tends to just define themselves as starkers. I mean, what else can you say about some of this? But, if you're starkers and you get 10 people to agree with you, you're not starkers anymore, you're a movement. So I mentioned this morning about DMT, and I made of it the kind of paradigmatic compound because it's so brief, so natural, so powerful, so quick to recover from. And it's also a very good paradigmatic case when talking about what the psychedelic experience is like to have, because I think if you have the DMT experience on the way to the center of that flash, you'll probably have all the other ones. It seems to lie at the center of the mandala. The most startling thing about the DMT flash, and I mentioned this morning when we were talking about Jung, is how astonishing it is. That death by astonishment seems the major danger. And this is even if you're an art historian, a Jungian, an aficionado of symbols, and so forth and so on. It seems to come from some dimension orthogonal to the human world. And it is not a unitary experience, the way the famous white light and all these other wordless, indescribable, elusive, mercurial things are. It isn't like that at all. It's extremely multiplistic, and it's extremely specific in its presentation. And when you smoke DMT, you have the feeling that you have burst into a place, that you have not had a psychological experience, you are not having a mental experience, you have burst into some kind of a space. And within that space, the first shock is that it's inhabited. And this is the shock I've never recovered from, because it was just the last thing I expected to find inside a chemical compound was the equivalent of a Bugs Bunny cartoon. It is inhabited by entities, is the only word to describe them. And they are, as I've said many times, they are like jeweled, self-dribbling basketballs. And there are many of them. And they come out of the background and they present themselves to you. They're literally vibrating up and down with excitement. They're faceted and rotating. And they see you as clearly as you see them. They even greet you. Some of you may recall the old Pink Floyd song, "The Gnomes Have Learned a New Way to Say Hooray." I think it's on Piper at the Gates of Dawn. It's the first album. Those Floyd fans were looking puzzled. It's because it was 40 years ago or something. Anyway, as you burst into this space, the gnomes say hooray, and they present themselves, and they are truly the gnomes of Central European fairy tales, archetypal gnomes. They are they're very humorous. They're very mercurial and delightful, but I think it's Jung warns against the humor of the spirit Mercurius, because it can turn on you. It's not a friendly humor. It's too crazy. Too many plates are being thrown. Too many cars are exploding. It's like a Marx Brothers cartoon that hovers just on the edge of changing from mayhem to mania. Very intense. And the most striking thing to me, and really the motivation for my career, is they are displaying new models of language that have never been seen before. They sing, and out of their singing elfin chatter condense objects which look like nothing at all in this world. I mean, the closest I've been able to come to them are the eggs of Fabergé, you know, these constructs in sapphire and ivory and crystal and vitreous glass that the French designer Fabergé created. Well, these things are like that, but they're like that raised to some excruciating pinnacle of completion, because as they show you these objects, you know beyond any possibility of contravention that if a single one of these objects were to exist in this world, it would change this world forever. If a single one of these objects were to exist in this world, we would spend 1,000 years studying this object. The last time this happened was a guy gave a speech up on a hill about moral obligation. We studied it for 1,000 years. This is the same kind of thing. And these Fabergé hyperdimensional objects are themselves undergoing a dynamic transformation. They're not static objects like the Fabergé eggs. They are undergoing changes, singing, condensing other objects. These objects are crawling all over the ground in front of you, clamoring for your attention. Now remember, 12 seconds before, you were sitting in a suburban living room somewhere grappling with some drug somebody wanted you to take. Now all that's gone, and here are these things. I call them tykes because I wanted to capture the sense of their childlikeness. I don't know why I called them tykes, actually. It just seemed like the appropriate thing. If some of you are classicists or students of the literature of the pre-Socratic philosophers, you might recall the 52nd fragment of Heraclitus, which says, the aeon is a child at play with colored balls. The aeon is a child at play with colored balls. And when you break your way into the presence of the aeon, it's extremely, I don't know, it's upsetting. You can't believe it's happening. There's a lot of cognitive dissonance. You could believe this if it just weren't happening to you. And there is this tremendous affection and interest in humanity, and then there is urgency, a lot of urgency. The tykes want to initiate you. They have a message, and the message is, you can do what we are doing. And what they're doing is using their voices to make physical objects condense out of the air. And they're saying, you can do this. Do it. Do it. Do it. And they're on you. And they jump in and out of your chest, which is something that is described in the Amazon too, the Hekule in the tryptamine snuff cults of the Yanomamo. They jump in and out of your chest, and they are saying, do this thing, do it, suspend your belief, and eventually you do it. You discover that you can drop the filter of meaning, that your voice can move back several registers, and out comes elf chatter. And this elf chatter is able to wring the air in front of you like a washcloth and get alchemical gold to drip out of the air and to begin to condense in front of you. Well, by this time, most people would like to call time out so they can make phone calls to various philosophers. But there's no time out. It just keeps going. And these things have the aura of strangeness, of alienness is palpable. There's an emotion in there that we just don't have in this world because it's composed of unbelievable alienness, in the presence of unbelievable familiarity. It's an ecstasy that is a coincidentia oppositorum. Simultaneously, it is both what it is and what it is not. And the human mind can't handle that. That's called cognitive dissonance. I mean, you just go into a conniption fit of some sort. Well, the very first time I smoked DMT in 1967, with absolutely no expectation, this happened to me. And it has happened every time since. And then I've had occasion to observe people taking DMT in countries where it's legal. And what I see is there is an archetype which surrounds DMT, which you must make your way through it. But at the center of the archetype is not present, and only the alien is present. The archetype is that of the circus or the carnival. The carnival. Think for a moment about the carnival. It has two aspects. One is blazing light and activity. At the center of the triple ring, the lady in the spangled costume is high above the main floor, and the lions and the tigers and the clowns are parading around. That's part of it. But it has another aspect. Just off to the side of the big tent, there are the sideshows, the hoochie-coochie dancers, the two-headed man, and so forth and so on. In other words, there's this kinky, peculiar shadow side of it. And I often, if any of you are fans of the film of Federico Fellini, here's a man who understood the archetype of the circus, and how, if you remember in Amarcord, that circus, or if you remember in Giulietta di Spiri, the flaming doorway into the room with the bed springs and the crepe paper flames. These are carnival images that relate back to DMT. When you finally come into the center of it, these are all seen to be veils. It veils itself that way, because that's how you, it's the old candy to the baby routine. It treats us as people who would like to go to the circus. And then it takes us to the circus. But then there is a revelation beyond that. And I don't know how many people present in this room have confronted the thing I'm talking about. I always, at this moment, am aware that some people are saying, my, doesn't he perfectly get it? And other people are saying, huh? What is this? What is this guy talking about? The point I want to make is it's real. It's not vague. You don't have to strain for it. Nobody wonders whether or not it happened to them. It's just like somebody walking up to you and taking you by the arm and saying, there's something I insist on showing you. Come this way, please. And I am it was the presence of the entities that shattered the person who I was, because I was a scientific rationalist, a reductionist. I had no room for elves in my cosmology. And here they were, hundreds of them. So it seems to me that this is a central question that shamanism has always dealt with, perhaps not with the kind of ontological sophistication that we imagine ourselves to have, but this is the question that must be asked. Who's in there? Who is this? There are at least three possibilities, and I'm not sure which is the most conservative. The first possibility is that we don't understand how the world is constructed, and that, in fact, there is a parallel universe running alongside of ours, full of elves who use a language to make objects. And then why you can burst through to this place on this one drug, then that raises, each explanation raises a lot of questions. Then the other possibility is, this is the Jungian possibility. And Jung, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the later things, he talks about these elves because of the Kibiri. The Kibiri are the alchemical children that appear in Act 3 of Faust, that Jung spent a lot of time on these alchemical Kibiri and the question of the homunculus. And he says at one place, I think he says, he describes them as autonomous psychic elements that have escaped from the control of the ego. This is a weird way to go about it. I mean, it's probably an accurate description, but how much does it tell us, you know? It means that the psyche is to be visualized as a half-gallon of mercury, and when we throw it on the floor, the mercury balls up and spreads everywhere, and each ball of mercury you look at, by gad, it has a little face looking back at you. That's because mercury is a mirrored surface. You're looking at your own psyche shattered into thousands of pieces around you. Another possibility, and one I leaned toward for years, and I still lean toward, because I've noticed the radical nature of your explanation diminishes with the distance since the last time you smoked DMT. The longer it's been, the more likely you are to have some humdrum notion that you can pour it into. So the humdrum notion that I settled on was, well, clearly these are just extraterrestrials. They don't come in silver ships demanding to be taken to the National Defense Agency. This is how they come. Why they come this way, who knows? They're coming through mind. Mind is the medium in which they travel. Where do they come from? Who knows? Can it even be located in the Newtonian space-time matrix? I mean, what do you want here? A star catalog number? Would that satisfy you? And then finally, and I think I've exceeded my number of possible explanations. And then finally, the explanation, which is my current favorite, it's a little disturbing, and I haven't quite figured out what to do with it, but I have a sense we're on the right track here. The reason the DMT space feels so peculiar, both alien and excruciatingly familiar, is because these things in this other place represent what I call an ecology of souls. This place is the one place you never thought you were going to make a visit to and come back to chat it around the coffee maker. They're dead. That's who these things are. This is the realm of the dead. Well, I have to confess, in all of my psychedelic voyaging and idea mongering and all of that, I never was able to go that far, to reach that far in my imagination. It sort of had to be presented to me. But if you go to shamans worldwide and talk to them about their spirit helpers and say, you know, what's the deal with this? You know, who are these things? And they say, well, these are the ancestors. Didn't you know? These are the ancestors. It's perfectly cut and dried and normal. I had occasion, I won't use his name to embarrass him, but I had occasion to expose a very well-known Tibetan high mucky muck to DMT. And he said after, he took it like a man, said afterwards, that is the lesser lights. That is the lesser lights. And if any of you are students of Mahayana Buddhism, you know that the lesser lights are the lights you see at the edge of the bardo. As you start into the 42-day process of dying, you encounter the lesser lights. This guy was saying to me, you cannot go further in the body and have any expectation of returning. In other words, once you see the lesser lights, you have stretched the umbilicus to matter to the breaking point. If you go one step further, it's eternity for you. Well, I don't know how I feel about this. The head type, I've had to then ask myself, the head type Is that me? Do you actually encounter your dead soul? Is there a dimension where you are both simultaneously dead and alive, both simultaneously witness and observer? I don't know, but I certainly think that if we're going to use a conservative explanation for these things, the only theory more conservative than that they are dead people is the theory that says that they are nothing whatsoever. And that just simply will not serve. I think it would come as a tremendous surprise to 20th century civilization if, orthogonal to all our expectations of space flight and virtual reality and all this techno-schmechno stuff that we're lining up in front of us, there would be a broadside from 90 degrees out of the unexpected, and it would be a doorway swinging open into the realms beyond organic existence. I resisted this fiercely, but I just don't know what we're going to do with these DMT creatures if we don't try to find a rational explanation. And any rational explanation will be exotic because the facts of the matter are exotic. Those of you who have not had this experience, who are sitting there thinking it would never happen to me, you're full of it. It will happen to you. This doesn't require the willful suspension of disbelief. This doesn't require a pure heart or dietary prescription. No, this is part of the human birthright. And the fact that we deny the existence of a non-human entity, intellect, intelligence on this planet is just part of our heritage from rationalism. And, you don't have to take it very seriously because rationalism, the philosophy that gives us permission to deny the invisible world, you know who founded the philosophy of rational materialism? Any takers? Aristotle was early. I think I'd give credit to René Descartes for modern materialism and rationalism. Well, you know who told René Descartes to found rationalism and materialism? An angel. Are you ready for this? This is a suppressed history episode in the history of human thought. Here are the facts, folks. 1619. René Descartes is 21 years old. He's a young Frenchman in search of adventure. He joins a Habsburg army that is going off to Prague to lay siege to Prague to put down an alchemical revolt there. They kick butt on these alchemists, win the war, and they're on their way back to France. And in September 1619, this French army camped at Ulm in southern Germany. Some of you may know Ulm as Einstein's hometown. And in fact, that figures in our story obliquely, as you will see. This French army camps at Ulm, and René Descartes hits the hay. And in the middle of the night, an angel appears to this young man in the radiance of his rooms and says, the mastery of nature is to be achieved through number and measure. Modern science is founded, folks, right there, right then, by an angel. So how far away are the informing voices? How rational is rationalism? How material is materialism? All of you must know, I'm sure, the famous story of Kekule, the German chemist Kekule, who discovered the benzene ring. He was struggling with this problem in physical chemistry, could not figure it out, fell asleep in his study, and the Ouroboros serpent appeared before him in his dream and took its tail in its mouth. And he came out of a sound sleep and said, I've got it. He walked to the blackboard. He drew the first benzene ring. Angelic intervention, from the unconscious. So the point of all this is to suggest that human history is completely interpenetrated by the peculiar, the non-human, that which has intentionality and affection for mankind, for humanity. And this is what shamans call to their aid. This is how the curing is done. It's done through these spirit helpers, they're called, elementals. And so far as I know, Jungianism is the only modern intellectual position where you can even raise this issue without having a net dropped over you. I mean, this is absolutely forbidden by the modern worldview. And yet it lies very, very close to the surface in our culture. I mean, as an example of how close to the surface it lies in our culture, consider for a moment Santa Claus. What's this about? Santa Claus is the master of the elves. The elves that he is master of are demon artificers. They make toys for the world's children in their vast underground toy shops. And where are these underground toy shops? At the North Pole. I don't have to tell a room full of Jungians that the North Pole is the axis mundi, Yggdrasil, the magic world ash, the center of the mandala. What are the colors of Santa Claus? Red and white, the colors of Amanita muscaria. Absolutely. What is the titulary animal of Santa Claus? Reindeer. Reindeer are very central to the Amanita muscaria cult because reindeer eat the mushroom and then excrete their urine, and this is thought to be a cleaner and easier way to take the mushroom than to take it on the so-called first pass. The second pass is after the reindeer have had it. Just an anecdotal aside, if you're ever in the Yakut Basin, one of the great perils of the intoxicated Amanita user is to crawl out of the yurt in the middle of the night to take a leak in the snow, and before you can back off, the reindeer come and knock you headlong because they want to get to this Amanita-flavored snow. So here is Santa Claus right in the center of our culture, and when you take it apart, all the motifs are there. The demon artificers, the elves, the cosmic axis, the magical flight. I mean, it's a beautiful example of the preservation of pagan psychedelic use into a modern context.